Most of us don't love uncertainty. In fact, many of us go out of our way to avoid it, choosing what's familiar, the predictable, the safe option, even when that gets in the way of things that we want. But the truth is, life doesn't really come with any guarantees. And the more we avoid uncertainty, the more anxious and stuck we tend to feel in our life. This is a continuation of our series on worry management skills. And so far in this series, we've talked about our basic model of worry, the basic engine that drives worry. And recently, we've been talking about intolerance of uncertainty as the fuel that really drives and fuels that worry engine. We've talked about various ways that intolerance of uncertainty can manifest itself. Things like avoidance or procrastination, seeking reassurance from other people, double checking things, excessive information gathering, not delegating tasks, all sorts of things that are aimed to try to eliminate or reduce uncertainty in our lives. But the problem is you can't eliminate uncertainty. You can't get rid of it. And so what doing these intolerance of uncertainty behaviors does is it really just limits our lives and limits what we can do. So rather than trying to eliminate uncertainty or to make our lives more certain, the idea is to build tolerance for uncertainty as a way of managing or addressing this intolerance of uncertainty. And so in the last video, we talked about building tolerance for uncertainty using structured behavioral experiments in which you intentionally plan to do something that you're uncertain of and to see what happens, essentially testing how good your worry is as a prediction. Now, the second way to build tolerance for uncertainty is to take advantage of naturally occurring opportunities in your daily life to do things you're uncertain about. The reality is, we face uncertainty multiple times a day, maybe even hundreds of times a day, every single day. And the vast majority of the time, this uncertainty turns out just fine. But the problem is, we often don't even notice the uncertainty in our lives. We often aren't consciously registering that all of these uncertain situations are resolving themselves just fine without any major negative consequences or problems. And by not consciously recognizing that fact, the fact that uncertainty is happening all the time and isn't turning out badly, we miss chances to build up our confidence in how to handle uncertainty. So, one other approach I often encourage clients to use is to intentionally look for everyday moments and see them as opportunities to practice tolerating uncertainty. And a helpful way to do this is to imagine the following question tattooed to the frontal lobe of your brain. And so it's a question through which you filter your world, filter everything that's happening. And that question is, if I were more tolerant of uncertainty, what would I do in this situation? And think about how that question could guide your choices to change the way you behave towards things. So, for example, if I were more tolerant of uncertainty, would I order the same thing I always order at this restaurant, or would I try something different? If I were more tolerant of uncertainty, would I ask that person out for a date, or would I stay in my seat and say nothing? If I were more tolerant of uncertainty, would I answer this phone call even though I don't recognize the number, or would I just let it go to voicemail? If I were more tolerant of uncertainty, would I speak up in this meeting and share my opinion? Or would I stay quiet and just wait to see what others say before I say anything? These kind of questions, if I were more tolerant of uncertainty, what would I do in this situation? What this does is it helps you to start noticing how often you avoid uncertainty and how often you're missing small chances to practice dealing with it. The reality is, we have numerous opportunities to tolerate uncertainty every single day. So the key is to start looking for those moments, to recognize them for what they are, and to take advantage of them when they happen. Now, you don't have to act on every single one. You don't have to do every single uncertainty. But just by simply asking yourself the question, if I were more tolerant of uncertainty, what would I do in this situation? What that does is it can shift your perspective. It helps you orient yourself towards uncertainty rather than away from it. Even just occasionally choosing the uncertain option can make a real difference as you practice it over time. And when you do these naturally occurring tolerating uncertainty experiments, or when you do the planned tolerating uncertainty experiments, think of it kind of like making a deposit into an internal tolerating uncertainty bank account. Each time you engage with uncertainty in a conscious way, you're gaining experience. You're giving yourself the opportunity to reflect on what you were worried might happen and to compare it to what actually happened. And usually, what you'll find is the worst case scenarios you imagined don't happen. Or even if something did go wrong, it's typically not as bad or as unmanageable as we fear. And that's a valuable realization. And every time you notice that uncertainty doesn't end in disaster, you're making another deposit into this bank account. And over time, this tolerating uncertainty bank account grows, and that account grows bigger and bigger and bigger. So when a bigger, more stressful uncertainty comes along in life, something that really matters, you'll have a whole bunch of experiences with uncertainty to draw upon. You can remind yourself of all of the past situations where you faced uncertainty and things turned out fine. And that history of experiences with uncertainty becomes a foundation for managing worry. It helps you feel more grounded and less overwhelmed with uncertainty because you've built up real life evidence, your own personal experiences, that you can handle the unknown. Now, out of all of the strategies and tools that I share with my clients, I find this one particular question, this way of thinking, if I were more tolerant of uncertainty, what would I do in this situation? It leads to some of the most significant changes. When people start applying that question to their daily lives, they begin to approach their world differently. Those habits and behaviors are rooted in an intolerance of uncertainty. Things like excessive checking, reassurance seeking, or avoiding decisions, those things start to fade as you become more tolerant of uncertainty. They lose their grip, and by losing their grip, they also lose how much they affect or limit your life. And this is because you're gathering more and more personal evidence that uncertainty is not just survivable, but often completely fine. And in doing so, you naturally become more confident with uncertainty. You stop waiting for certainty before you act, and instead, you learn to move forward even when you don't have all of the answers. And that's an incredibly powerful and important shift. And if you're interested in the next video in this worry management series, which is going to focus on another factor that can maintain excessive worry, I'll link to it up here once it's been posted. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.